Welcome to The Clean Slate, a podcast where we chat about facilities management, commercial cleaning, and keeping the working world safe, clean, efficient, and free from risk. I'm your host, Trista Sobek. Hello, and welcome to The Clean Slate. Today on the program, we're having Gyan Awuku-Sao, who lives in Ghana, Africa, and describes himself as a champion for sustainability in facilities management. He works in a company right now who concentrates on customer experience and bringing customer experience into sustainability and sustainability into customer experience in a way to motivate people to change their behaviors. You'll hear Gyan talk about how every little change really makes a difference. No matter how much we hear it, microplastics are poisoning our waterways, and there are ways that facility managers can be the champion of making change across the globe. So we had a really enjoyable conversation, and I hope you enjoy it as well. So tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got started and where you're working now and facility management and sustainability. What's your background story a little bit like?
All right. So my name is Gyan Awuku-Sao. I come from Ghana, West Africa. So I'm 100% Ghanaian. So I'll take you back to when I was in the university, in college, right? I studied building technology construction. So I was exposed to everything about how a building goes up from the foundation right up to the roof. So basically that was my college degree. But when I finished with my school, right, and I started to work, my first job was actually in facility management. So back then they used to call it estate management, which is practically the same thing. So it was there that I worked for a few years and I realized, hey, I actually love what I'm doing. I actually like to, coordinate people and the spaces in which they live. People and the spaces in which they work, and I'm someone who naturally likes to organize. I like people. I like to talk to people. I like to organize things. I like to get things done properly. So I realized this was actually the field for me. So I decided to do a master's. So I traveled abroad. I went to Switzerland, where I did a master's in facility management. So that was when my knowledge was actually solidified. With a few years of work experience I'd gotten, I did my master's, and then my knowledge really became established in facility management. So from then, I decided to become the best at what I do. So I started reading a lot. I joined IFMA. I took FM really, really seriously from that point. So after school, after the master's degree, I came back to Ghana. Then I began to work again, back to the same company. And I guess with time, as the years went by, I became really, really more experienced. And I did a bit of project management too. And I moved to a new company now, which is Majorel, where I'm also the head of facilities for the country, for Ghana. And on a day-to-day basis, we basically run the company office spaces, in terms of the utilities, in terms of water, the user, like I call it the user experience, because we have a lot of staff over here. So basically we ensure that the staff are okay in the environment and, everything goes well. We do a lot of coordination.
Yeah. So how did you specifically get interested into this idea of sustainability? Because I feel like for the last maybe 20 years, it's been such a buzzword, and for a little bit, as I would say here in the States, we kind of like to throw that word around as a marketing term. And so I would say, when did you really see that, look, I have the power to make a change here, and here's how I can do it?
Well, I'm not really sure exactly when it happened, but somewhere along the line, as I began to read, as I began to see how energy was being wasted around, how water was being wasted, I always felt like, no, there's a way to do this better. There's a way to make this right. Then I didn't know it was called sustainability. But as I began to read, I realized, no, this is something that, I could really be interested in. I like to optimize buildings. I like to be efficient. I don't like to waste naturally. So when I started reading about sustainability, my interest really rose. And, yeah, I decided that this will be, my niche. This is where I'd like to be, my little corner within the FM space.
Your little corner of the FM space is
yes,
is sustainability. I like that, kind of figuring out how to carve that niche for you, just based on what you're interested in. When you got your master's, did they talk about this a lot? And what year was that?
So I graduated in 2017. So there was sustainability as part of our course package, right? But it wasn't one particular subject that was stressed upon so much. It was just one of the number of subjects that we studied in school. But it's something personally I always like. I mean, I love the environment. And also, I might have forgotten to say this. The company where I used to work for, they are a waste management company. So I guess I might have picked up a bit of that from there.
I would say so.
Company.
Yeah. So you kind of see firsthand the waste that people produce, as well as what we can do with it to, because I think a lot of people have some challenges with understanding when you throw something away, it doesn't go away. It's out there still. So, what are some of the things that you firsthand have seen that you want to make a difference with?
Okay, so first of all, the biggest thing is plastics, right? Here in Ghana, it's still a big challenge, right? There's a lot of plastic out there which are generated from plastic bottles, single-use plastics. There's so many of them out there which just go back to the landfill site. And, plastics take a really long time to decompose or break down. And they're just sitting at the landfill site. It's a big thing. We have a few people out here in Ghana who are doing some good stuff with plastics. They are recycling plastics. A couple of guys are using them for pavement blocks, for the sidewalks.
Wow.
But there's too much plastic. Yeah, there's too much plastic and there's too few people who are recycling. So there's a huge deficit, and plastics is the biggest thing, is the biggest problem we have at the moment. What to do with all the excess plastics. And because plastic is quite handy, most of the manufacturers like to use it because, you like to package in plastic because it's easy. It's better than glass, so they say.
Right. So when you, one of the things that I often hear as a pushback to recycling plastics is, okay, if we're recycling, we're still using a lot of energy to recycle. So what's kind of the answer to that when you're having a conversation with people as far as recycling plastic?
I mean, it's neither here nor there. But
Okay.
what I always tell them is that, listen, the plastic always mostly ends up in the ocean. Think about the aquatic life, the fish and I've seen so many terrible pictures of what plastic does to the fish in there. Some of them swallow them. Some fish get trapped in plastic pieces. It's really not a very good sight. So usually I always talk about aquatic life because ultimately most of the waste ends up in the sea. And if we care about our water life, we should learn to cut out plastic altogether, or learn to reduce or recycle it.
Right. So then what are some of the ways that personally you draw a straight line from, because I remember one of the things that really hit me was seeing the video of the sea turtle with the straw stuck in him. And it was a very famous clip, and it got everybody like crazy to like switch their straws and everything. Which I'm like, we don't even need straws. Why do you need a straw? But what are some of the things that, how do you get somebody to, especially a facility manager or a company who's running a company, they're worried about the bottom line. They're worried about, if they're going to be able to pay their bills, if they're going to be able to pay their employees. How do you get them to care and change their motivations and to change things to be like, okay, don't forget, no more plastic bottles in the break room. How do you make that change?
So I guess it's all about top management involvement. If as a facility manager anywhere, if you want to push an agenda through, you really have to get the top management involved. You have to go to them with compelling evidence of why they need to recycle. And besides, honestly, recycling, the initial cost is getting the bins, getting separate containers to separate the waste, and then giving them off to the recyclers. It's all about convincing top management. Once you can get the buy-in of top management, the rest of the staff would follow suit. I don't think if you put out separate bins out there, members of staff would deliberately go put, for example, compost in the plastic section. No, I don't think so. Once it's an agreed upon company policy, I think all staff members would follow through and then do what they have to do to get a recycling done. So topmost priority is to get top management involvement, and that is where you can actually make a difference.
Yeah, it almost has to be a part of the culture of the company, right? And get it ingrained in there. One of the things that I came up with this week is I was talking about composting, and we have these little tea pods or pods that have the coffee in it, and you put it in the machine and your coffee comes out. Well, those little pods are compostable, and I'm like, why don't we compost them? Why aren't we putting them in a separate bin to just take them out, compost them, put them in some garden somewhere? It'd be very easy. But it's just getting people to understand. And they're like, well, then we have to separate them. We have to put them in here. So it's like getting that complacency out of the way to be like, this is why we should be taking this extra step. And here's why it's important.
Yes, and I also believe that culture behaviors can be built over time. There are lots of things we don't do now, which when we start to do, eventually as time goes on, it becomes a part and parcel of us. So yes, eventually, initially there'll be the kickback because, people would wonder what the fuss is all about. Why don't I just dump the coffee pots in the bin? But I guess with time and practice, consistent practice, they would get used to it and it becomes a part of their culture. So.
Right. I like that a lot. Yeah, it is practice being, modeling that behavior. So let's get back to your story and facility management. Do you have like a specific moment where you were like, I have to get people to start changing their ways? You said you worked I kind of interrupted your flow there. You were talking about working in the waste management and plastics, but now we're also hearing about microplastics, which I guess are basically in everything and don't break down. So, could you do like 5 things that facility managers can do to focus on, getting rid of plastics and microplastics?
Okay. Getting rid completely or, reducing? I
guess reducing. We're not going to get rid of it unless somebody is king of the world and says, we have to step back in time. Unfortunately, our technology, I don't think will let us do that, but definitely reducing and being aware. Maybe 5 to 7 things, whatever you can think of.
Okay, so where I work at the moment, right? We have these water dispensers, right? Water fountain. And, typically where we have the water dispensers, they produce like these plastic cups, right? Where anyone who needs water just picks, a little plastic cup, gets a cup of water and then puts it in the bin, right? But where I work, we don't do that. Everyone is supposed to get a water bottle. Every member of staff. So if you come to work without a bottle, you're probably not going to have any water. Because there's no cup for you.
No cup for you. I like that.
There's no cup for anybody. So everyone is encouraged to get their own water bottle, or you bring your own mug or cup, and that really cuts down. That's like a typical example of how you can cut down the use of plastics, like drastically, because those plastic cups, someone takes a sip of water and it's in the bin. You can accumulate like hundreds of them within a single week.
How wasteful, right? How incredibly wasteful.
Yes, very, very wasteful. And these are single-use plastics, so you can imagine where they're going to end up next, somewhere in the landfill, and probably stuck in the ground for the next 100 years.
Right.
Yes. So that's like one big way of reducing plastic usage. The second would be recycling. if and when members of staff, bring plastic bottles to work or plastic elements, plastic bags, you should always have a dedicated bin where they can, throw them out when they're done. And then you'd have a recycler who can pick them up at the end of the month, at the end of the week. I don't know how, with whatever arrangement you have. The third will be to encourage the use of paper bags, the famous brown paper bags. It's nicer to encourage those ones as opposed to using plastic bags. Probably when you bring your lunch to work, you can bring in a nice brown paper bag. And it's easier, right? Because we don't use plastic, and then we also end up saving the environment as well.
Right.
I remember back in Switzerland, when you go to a shop to buy stuff, to do like a grocery shop, to do your shopping, right? If you want a plastic bag, you have to pay for it.
We're just starting that in the States. Just beginning.
Yes, they don't give it to you for free. But they encourage you to buy these bigger bags, which can be used several times for your shopping. But if you insist you want a plastic bag, they actually sell it to you. And that's like a demotivator to use plastic bags.
Right.
Because it's easier to just get an actual bag and then, come grocery shopping with it whenever you want to.
Right. Okay, another one.
So another one will be cutlery, the plastic cutlery, especially for events and parties, right? It's easier to just have plastic plates and spoons and knives, and when everyone is done eating and drinking, you just toss them in the trash. That's the easier option, right? But that's also not environmentally friendly.
Right.
We would have to go back to to using forks and knives, proper actual forks and knives and, and plates and stuff. It's a lot more work, but it's more environmentally friendly.
Right. Yeah, I'm thinking about any break room, that I've been in the last, 10 years, maybe has all had plastic cutlery, plastic everything, plastic, plates. So it's like, why don't you just bring your own plate? And, and like you said, it goes back to culture and from top down.
Mm-hmm. And especially at work, I know most offices will have like a kitchen or a canteen or something, right? So it's a tough decision, but take away all the plastic cutlery. Take everything out. Let everyone bring their own mugs or their own cups, their own spoons, everything. Let them bring it themselves. When you come, you can probably provision for locker space can be made for everyone so that you keep your cups and your spoons and plates in there. So you go for them when you need them. You know how we have all these coffee machines with plastic cups and plastic pods. It's a whole lot of plastic in our system now. And I think it's easier if we will find, very tactical ways to cut them out completely.
Yep. One of the things I wanted to key in on, struggling back, you were talking about taking the plastics and making them into blocks so you can make the streets. How does that work? And is that pretty common that you've seen, or, can you explain that process a little bit more?
All right. So I think so far I've seen two people in this country, in Ghana, who actually do this. Now they pick up the plastic, they have a way of compacting it, they add some other materials to it, and you actually have a block, which is solid, which is strong, which can be used as a construction material. I saw on a video somewhere, one of these African countries, where they used plastic bottles to actually to build like houses. Obviously not a full like story building, but they used it to create homes. I personally know a lady with a company called Trashy Beauties. She uses plastic bottles to make artifacts, decorations, collectibles. Mm-hmm. I mean, I would have, if I thought about this earlier, I would have brought pictures. I could send you pictures after this podcast.
Okay, that'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah, she actually makes flowers with plastic bottles.
Amazing.
Yeah, and these are like collectibles you can keep in your home as decorations you can hang on your wall, and in doing so, the plastic doesn't go immediately to the the dump site. Right. At least it gets to stay longer in the system before it's finally, thrown away.
How long does it take a plastic bottle to break down when it's in the landfill?
Over 100 years. Over 100. And it doesn't actually break down completely. It only breaks into microplastic.
Right.
So yes, it will disintegrate, but it doesn't break down the way compost breaks down, becomes part of the soil. Plastic never really breaks down completely. That's the problem. So as much as plastic is nice and handy and easy to use, it's a big problem for us.
Right. Can you talk a little bit about how facility managers really play a part in this whole thing? They run the buildings, they run the people, how can they really make sure that this is a priority?
Okay, so before I answer that question, I'll just give a little preamble, if that's fine.
Yeah.
That's okay with you?
Absolutely.
So the earth on which we live on is about 71% water and about 29% land, right? And even with this 29% land, human beings have built on approximately just about 10% of it. And the built environment, that's all buildings put together, it generates about 50% of all global CO2 emissions.
Wow.
And that's a whopping amount, yeah. Almost 50%, buildings alone, almost 50%, of CO2 emissions worldwide. And look at this stat. The average human spends about 90% of their time indoors. And this is actually an American stat,
I was going to say that's
the average American spends 90% of their day indoors. Then we say that the facility manager is the custodian of the built environment, because there are several professionals in the built environment. There's the architects, there's the planners, there's the engineers, but the facility managers are people that actually take care of the built environment. We are like the custodians, the gatekeepers, if you want to say. So there's no other profession better suited to champion sustainability than the facility managers. It's just what it is. If you are the gatekeeper, then you might as well take charge of sustainability, because the buildings are releasing 50% of global CO2 emissions. That's whooping. And if facility managers don't take care of their buildings, this could get worse as time goes on.
Right. And so the facility manager, go ahead.
No, so they're in the prime position. They are just at the right place to control this,
Right. And it's just about taking that. It's almost like what happened to you. You have to take that personal responsibility to say, I'm going to bring this to my professional job and, not allow it to go further than here, when you're making decisions. Is there anything besides plastics that has piqued your interest when it comes to buildings and keeping them more sustainable?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's a whole lot, right? So there's also paper, right? Some trees have to go down for paper to be produced. Trees have to be cut for paper to be produced. Now, by no means would I say, I would not sit here today and say, no, paper is not important. No, paper is very important. But we can reduce the amount of paper we use. Now in the offices, we can print only when it's necessary. You really don't have to print every single document. I mean, there's email, there's collaborative work platforms like SharePoint. There are ways to work online without actually printing. So I'd say, what I'd always say to people at work is, print only when it's really, really important. Let's save paper. If you have to print, hey, you can do a front and back, so that use like one sheet instead of two. It's a little thing, right? You may not see how important it is, but from your own little corner, if everyone should start saving on the paper, the paper they use globally would probably be getting somewhere. So usually at the workplace, I always encourage people to, hey, print less. Let's do more emails. Let's do more collaborative online working, and then try to reduce the amount of paper we use.
Right.
Let's give the printers a rest. The printers and the photocopiers.
Yeah. Sometimes they don't work anyway, so might as well. Enjoying the podcast? Leave a review. To otherwise support our podcast, please share and follow us on your favorite streaming platform. You can also visit our website to find show notes and more info on each episode at www.openworksweb.com/podcast. Want to be a guest on an upcoming podcast? Check out the information in the description to apply. We'll see you next time, and remember, keep it clean.